All right.
I don't wanna be
Anything other than what I've been trying to be lately. We were talking right before this. We were talking about how that song is the biggest run-on sentence in music.
That's the craziest lyric.
Hi, welcome back to an episode of the Hummingbird Podcast. It has not been in existence for a while now, and I wanted to bring it back, and I'm so glad to have Swoon on the podcast. Woo! We love Swoon.
What's up?
And and I'm Dan, and let's see, where should we start?
Yeah. Did you have like a?
I had like a light outline, but I feel like now it's just whatever is gonna happen right here is what it's gonna be. You know, I was gonna ask you some basic questions about like music and all that shit, but
Okay.
you know, we can get there.
All right.
But what's been the theme lately in your life?
The theme, just music, working on music, return to solo music for the first time in years. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want to say too much because I don't want to like reveal too much before it's like ready, you know. But yeah, it's just been really exciting to be working on my own stuff again. We just put out Andrea's EP.
It's fire.
Yeah, it's I'm super proud of it. I'm super happy with the result, and people seem to be really connecting with it, which is awesome. We spent like a whole year making it, so it's you know, exciting to have it out, and it's a relief that it's out. Because yeah, I mean, a lot of that time was very excruciating, just, you know, kind of turning over every stone, trying to, you know, really make the best thing we could possibly make at that time. And I feel like we did. I learned a lot from the process too. But it's nice to have that done and have it out and have people living with it and etc. And it's nice to be moving forward and, you know, be excited about new stuff. You know, because, you know, as you know, the end is always the hardest part and the beginning is always the easiest and most fun part, is like starting stuff, sort of no consequences, playing and creating. And then, you know, once you're past that point with something, with a song or a project or whatever, then you get to the point where it's like, okay, now I have to get serious and finish it. And like, you know, and put the finish line somewhere, which is the hardest part always, right? Is like deciding when it's done.
Is that where like deadlines and stuff come in for you?
Sometimes. In this case, yeah. In this case, it was that, because I feel like we were definitely in this mental state of like it never being done. You know, like we were definitely going in circles after a certain point. You know, like toward the end, where we had been living with the songs for so long that it was like, you know, we were kind of going back and forth on like certain things and etc., and kind of getting to this point where we were getting more and more indecisive about stuff. And I think that's where the deadlines came in handy, because it was like, well, we just can't anymore. We can't be doing that. Like, there's no option anymore to do it. So it forced us to just have to like say, okay, now it's done, which we needed. We did do one of the songs called No Good in the last month. Like the song was written. She had written it on acoustic guitar for a long time, a long time before that. But we decided in the last month before the release before the submission of the project, that we wanted to add it onto the track list. And so that, as opposed to all the other songs that lived with us for a year, that song was like, okay, let's take this voice memo of a song that you have and turn it into a fully complete thing, mixed and mastered within a couple weeks. But which at first we were kind of like dreading. We were like, fuck, it sucks that we're going to have to do this so quickly. But I actually really enjoyed it. And I pretty quickly started to feel like this is actually great that we're doing this, because we've been in that headspace for so long. It's going to be really fun to just not be able to overthink it and just make it and be like, if it's good, it's good, done.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and you guys, you put a little like timestamp on it too. I'm sure like it
Right.
made things fresh again because
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
you release something just like okay, but this is a new thing that we're releasing. Also, not something that we've sat with forever, and not something that I'm just like
Right.
yeah, because
It's true, yeah.
you know I have songs that I've had for like 2 years or whatever that I'm still planning on releasing.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
like you get burnt out on it so
Oh yeah.
quickly.
Mhm.
And then 2 years later, it's like you're not even the same person at all anymore.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I think also like it's rare, not impossible, but it's rare that a song will get that much better after a certain point. Like just it's just in terms of like quantity, like less time or less often is it that you know you make something and you love the original idea, whatever you make in the first couple times you work on it, and then you make it twice as good, you know, a month later or beyond, you know. I feel like generally like 90% of how good a song is going to be you get within the first few times you tackle it. And then beyond that, you make small, you know, sometimes, yeah, like 6 months into making a song or 8 months into making a song, suddenly it just gets like 10 times better. But you can't have that commitment with every song. You can't commit to, you know, 8 months of working on every single song you ever make, I feel like, because you're also then cutting into like time where you could be writing more music or making other things and etc. And like, you know, I don't know. So I've been having that shift in mentality lately.
With okay, with this project that you guys are working on, or that you guys just released, what how soon between like the conception of a song and finishing everything, mix everything, was it? Did you have songs that were like the mix was completely finished for a while before you?
No.
All of
well,
them
the
were
singles,
just like
only the singles.
oh yeah, because they were already released.
We're really bad at that. Like we generally have the mix done like, or have the mix and master done like days before we have to submit it. Generally, like for some reason. So we definitely are procrastinators. Like we don't.
Was it just like life getting in the way where you guys were just like
sort
depressed
of
and shit?
yeah. So we were working on it for over a year. I mean, honestly, it was like, so the starting point that, or we consider the starting point of the project was this when we went to Big Bear. We had a Big Bear trip with a couple friends, and we started writing for the.
When was that?
For the project. That was in September of last year, I think. Like August or September.
It's like a year ago.
So like a little over a year ago. The project ended up coming out in November of this year, so that's why I'm saying it's like a little over a year.
And all of the songs besides that last one were from that?
No, well the thing is, so quite a few of those songs had been started prior. Actually, maybe even most of them. But that trip, I don't know, was when we got into the headspace of like we're making a project.
Okay, so you guys were just making songs and you're like, oh wait, this makes sense as a project, like a bigger.
Yeah, or we decided prior to that, like we want to make a project now. Like it feels right to make an EP, like to do something a little longer. Because prior to that, we'd only done singles, and we had talked a lot about what a project would look like. So we were like, well, let's do it. Let's, you know, and we did not intend on it taking as long as it would. We thought it was going to take like 3 months, 4 months or something, but it ended up taking way longer. And so we went on the trip and we just made a bunch of stuff, just to have like material. And then what the year sort of was like trying to work on different stuff. Like, you know, we had a lot of material. Some of it was like voice memos of stuff that Andrea had written on her own. Some of it was stuff that, you know, we worked on the trip, or, you know, instrumental stuff, whatever. So we're like trying to write to everything and seeing where everything goes. And then as the time goes on, you go from, you know, 20 songs to, you know, 6, which is what it ended up being. But like, you know, it's like you're working on one for a while, you think it might work out, and then at some point you're like, actually, this isn't really, I'm forcing this at this point. So you kind of like stop, you know, messing with that song, and then you move on to a different song, and then you kind of keep doing that. You're kind of like jumping from song to song to song to song to song, and then, you know, the ones that end up working out just kind of rise to the surface, and the rest of them don't. And that took a long time, but it's not like we were working every single day the entire year.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of that time was just thinking about like what we want it to be, and sort of conceptualizing and stuff. And then there was one phase in particular of a couple months where we were just really uninspired. Like we had hit a wall with all the music. Every time we'd have a session and work on stuff, like it just felt like we weren't getting anywhere. We really just felt uninspired. You know, it was like writer's block, I guess. And so that, you know, after a certain point, we just weren't forcing it. We're like, well, let's just work on other stuff or like whatever, you know. We were doing shows too, so that was taking up some attention, and that was fun. We ended up going on another trip during that time, not for the EP, just to fuck around and like make stuff and have fun being creative. And that helped. That kind of helped. And then also, yeah, playing the shows helped, and reconnecting with people, because it kind of reminded us like what we're doing in a weird way. Because, you know, we had been in like, you know, a blacked out room, like I'm just making music for ourselves for so long that we kind of forgot that there's people like out there. So when we went to the shows, we were meeting people, and we're like, oh yeah, like this is awesome. This is why we do it, because at the end of the day, we can connect with people through it. And that made us more excited to go back in and like you know, and finish the songs and stuff. But yeah, I forget what
I don't know, but you guys also just hit like a new level of like legitness as being artists with getting like management and like stuff like that, right? Or do you feel like, how much of a role do you think that played in?
I think it played a role. I mean, I think we try to minimize it, because we don't want to have to sacrifice much on that end of the creative end, when it comes to having a manager or like the distribution deal thing.
What does having a manager, what does that do, or how does that help?
Well, it's just really the big thing is it's just another person that's waiting on you. Like that's like constantly reminding you that they're waiting on you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because your audience is like, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying with the shows. You know, if you're not constantly meeting your audience, then your audience is kind of invisible. And like, you know, we're not at that point yet where we have people DMing us every day, like, where's the new music? Where's the new music? Where's the new music? You know? You know, sometimes you get that for sure, but like not that much, not so much that it becomes like a whole thing. So it's easy to just like not,
because the pressure's not there.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to just be like, well, doesn't matter how long I take, really, you know. So the pressure's only on you put it on yourself. Like, I don't want to wait 3 years before I put something out, so I'm gonna put pressure on myself. But what the manager does is like, here's this person who does this professionally and who is reminding you on a daily basis, like, you know, and he's not the kind of person, and I can only speak for what he's like, because I don't know, you know, he's the only manager I've ever worked with, but he's not like calling us like, what are you guys doing today? Like, are you working on music? None of that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's more just like, we have these weekly phone calls every Monday where it's like, okay, where's everything at? Like touch base, where's everything at? And that helps, because it's like, when you do that enough times and you're like, there's nothing new, then you're like, okay, we should probably start doing stuff, because we're not, you know, we don't have anything new to kind of, because also he has nothing to do if we don't give him something, right? Like, if we don't give him new material, then he can't do his job. So he's just waiting on that. And you know, to his credit, we thought that going into this EP, it was only going to be a few months, like 3 months or something. And so we had that whole mentality of like, okay, just give us like 3 months, we'll get you a new project, or whatever, 4 or 5 months. We'll get you a year later, project.
You're like, hey.
Exactly. And so like, to his credit, there was no point where he was like upset about that. Or whatever. He was like,
because he gets it. He knows how long it takes.
Yeah. I think so.
Or how long it can take.
Right. Exactly. He's not really a creative person, which I think is kind of a good thing. Because he doesn't try to get involved in that side of things. He's like, I like being on this side. I like being on the business side. Let me take care of that, you know, and et cetera.
Yeah, or like, at least not artistically creative, because that's a whole art form in itself.
You're right, absolutely, yeah. I just mean, he doesn't make music or whatever. So, Jesus. So, yeah, that helps, I think, because he just kind of lets the creative side, you know, he doesn't try to get involved. He'll give us his opinion and stuff, but he doesn't try to like control that side of it at all. So he was really understanding about it taking as long as it did. But it did help. I mean, I don't know. Without him, we probably would have taken longer, or maybe canceled it at some point and been like, oh, we're just going to do something else. I don't know.
All right. Let me ask this, because it's my podcast.
Okay.
How much of a role does the universe or God or fate or whatever, how much does that play, in your opinion, in what you guys have done so far?
How much does that play? I mean, probably a big one. I mean, if it's the universe, it's the universe. Like, it's like, you know.
Do you feel like it's
everything, I guess.
Sets stuff up for you?
Not consciously, though, I guess is what I'd say. Like, none of the process, like we're not thinking about that, right? When it's happening, we're just kind of doing, or just like reacting.
Yeah.
But if, like, in my opinion, do I think it played a role? I mean, of course, like, you know, a lot of, you know, the serendipity that led to what the songs ended up being, you know, you can't really explain. They just kind of came, just happened. It's like things happened and came from the universe.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Just like a session gets canceled and then somebody else happens to be free that day and then you go there and you end up writing a new part or
even
whatever
just
the
an
case
idea,
is.
you know, like I can think of like moments where we were at a wall with something and we kind of, you know, we would have these moments a lot where we kind of know what it needs, but we just don't know how to get there, I guess. Like, this needs to feel more like this. It's a little too whatever. But then, and so we're just trying all these different, you know, routes to reach that destination. But everything is like hitting a wall. Everything's like, no, that's not working. That's not working. That's not working. So I can think of moments where like one of us would have an idea, like, what about this? And then we do it and it's like, perfect. That's exactly what it was. That kind of thing is like, where did it come from? You know, I don't know. It's just like happens. It's like, so I would say, yeah, that's like the universe, like just be in that moment, like coming together, I guess, or coming through you or whatever is an idea.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Last night when we were at the Martins party,
Construct event.
yeah, I was having a conversation with someone, you know, that guy that I was talking to outside, and then you guys had all kind of left at one point, but he'd sort of like walked into our conversation, started talking to us.
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Okay.
No.
He was on one for sure. He was.
Oh, I think I do remember.
Yeah.
But anyway,
we ended up in a really long, intense conversation. Well, really, it was me listening to him speak for for like half an hour. But I like doing that sometimes. I like just like letting people talk and like seeing and what comes out. Yeah, and just learning. And like, I don't know, it's a weird internal thing that happens sometimes when I'm like, because I was also kind of scared in that for a sec. I was like, oh really? Yeah, I'm like, does he want to hurt me right now? But,
wow.
But yeah, no, I don't think so.
He's just an intense person.
Very intense person, yeah. But one thing that he said was really stuck with me, and he was talking about how he was asking me questions, and I had said something about like signs, you know, like signs from the universe, and just how I've been going through my life like just looking for the signs and following the signs. And he's like, you're waiting. He's like, you're waiting right now. You need to be doing
right
and going for stuff. Right. Basically, he said it a little bit differently, and but it stuck with me. And so I'm trying to figure out like what the right balance is between like waiting for things to happen and come into my life and like and going for things, and it's like a weird timing thing. Because like I can't even go for stuff until I'm ready to go for something. You know? Just,
you also don't want to force yourself to do it just because somebody told you that you're waiting and you're not doing. So then you're just, you know, because that would also
but that's also not the worst thing either, because sometimes just having that like little motivation, like, and that's the thing that could have been the catalyst, you know. But maybe until I had that conversation, I wouldn't have been ready to go for, because I mean, I woke up and I showed you that email and stuff that I had written, and like
well, and it's because it's like you have to find the balance between, or what the difference is between forcing something and pushing yourself. Because pushing yourself is a good thing, like, you know, sometimes you need a push, but forcing something is not a good thing, right? It's like when you're completely forcing. So you have to find some middle ground between those two, where it's like, well, because sometimes you can use not forcing it as an excuse to just not do anything as well, to not act, you know, which can be bad. So that balance, I think, is a tough one. I relate to that though a lot. Even just specifically creatively lately, I've been thinking a lot about that, like just in my method, because I feel like I've been kind of doing an overhaul of my method of you know, creating music in the process, like because I feel like I've always been like an overthinking kind of person, and I feel like I've always, you know, prided myself in putting a lot of thought into what I do, and I don't think I could ever stop myself from doing that to some extent, but like I've been thinking a lot about just sort of like what you're saying, like acting and like doing versus like thinking about and planning, because at the end of the day, like I feel like that's your instrument, sort of like when I watch really amazing musicians play an instrument. It's something that I've always been jealous of because I'm not very, I don't do it really. Like a guitarist who is so, you know, in tune with their instrument that they're not thinking anymore. They're just like
full expression.
Yeah, it's like the line between, or the wall between what they're feeling and the instrument itself is like the thinnest it could possibly be. So it's just like streamlined. It's like going straight from like the heart and the brain, you know, out the instrument essentially. You're just emoting through it and feeling it, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas like, for example, like I play guitar and stuff, but like I haven't played long enough, or I haven't practiced enough, I guess I'd say, that I can play without thinking really. You know, maybe simple stuff a little bit, but I can't just kind of go and like, and explore it in that way without kind of like falling off. So I say all that to say, in the same way when you're making music, like, you know, I feel like the more you think about it, the further you are from like just reacting and instinct and like, and all that stuff. And I feel like I want to get to a point where I'm trusting that more. I think I do. Like in the moment, if I'm making something, I'll have an idea and I'm like, okay, that'll be cool. And then I try it. So that's like instinct. But I feel like I do have this fear and this trepidation whenever I have an idea. Like it's immediately met with like scrutiny from my own like mind, you know, like it's immediately met with like, maybe not, I don't know, like second guessing it. Whereas I feel like I'm looking to be more in a state of like constantly doing, so that I don't even give myself the opportunity to like think too much, you know, like I'm just like create, which is kind of what I was saying before about the songs, like about how I feel like it really doesn't get that much better over time. I feel like, you know, usually the last, like if you took a year, the last 6 months of it is you just convincing yourself that it's fine, you know, kind of sometimes, you know what I mean? Like it took you
That's
6 months
fine.
to like, or it took you a short amount of time to get it where it is. And then, you know, and this is not including the tiny little, you know, mixing or whatever, the little tweaks or whatever, but like the majority of what the song is, it only takes a certain amount of time to do. And then it takes you however long it takes you to convince yourself you should put it out.
I think that care and energy like translates though, you know, like if you're spending all this time and something just feels like just not totally right to you, you know, and you don't want to put it out because you're like, something, I don't know, I don't even know what it is, but something about this isn't totally right. So you just keep tweaking until you say, you know what, this is about as right as we're going to fucking get it, you know?
That's right, yeah. And also like, because the thing I'm trying not to do is be wholly about the idea. Like I don't want the idea to be the thing. It's more like my creativity is my instrument. The same way, like if you were playing a guitar solo, like if you played a guitar solo every day, just completely different. Instead of being like, this guitar solo needs to be perfect, it's like your ability to do it is what it's about. So it's like today it might be one way, tomorrow it might be the other way, and whatever. But like, what?
Have you seen that video? Have you seen that video of John Mayer when he's like apologizing for saying the N-word and then he like rips a solo?
No. Jesus Christ. I didn't even know
There's a video
happened.
of John Mayer. I love John Mayer, by the way. He's one of my biggest influences, but Edwin had showed me this video where I guess he had like, this was back in his like, you know, like drug abuse days.
Yeah.
And he was in an interview with Playboy. They asked him if he liked black girls, and during his answer he said the N-word.
Jesus.
and yeah, so like the next day, or I think sometime really soon, because he knew that article was going to come out, he was like on stage and he apologized and like publicly, and then just started ripping the Gravity solo like right afterwards.
He just knows
this really long drawn out
like,
apology.
This is all I can give you.
Yeah.
This is my only worth.
Yeah.
Value.
And it's just like, I don't know, I think it was, I don't know.
That's kind of
it was really,
but
it was hilarious. It was just kind of tone deaf. I think
no, yeah,
really
exactly,
like what it was. But
that's like the David Guetta thing where he's like, the George Floyd thing where he's like, shout out to his family. And he's like, you haven't seen that?
No.
You know David Guetta, the DJ? He's like DJing, like he's doing like a live stream DJ thing during COVID and during the like George Floyd protests. And he's like, I want to say a shout out to George Floyd and his and a shout out to his family. And he made like a edit of one of his like techno songs with like Martin Luther King like samples all over it. And then so he's like DJing and he's like, shout out to his family. And then it's like, boom, boom, like playing DJing. is really funny. That's another one. Is
Yeah,
like tone deaf.
yeah. There's so many. There's so many of those. It's like
Yeah,
when
nice.
during COVID when all the celebrities sung Imagine,
Right. Yeah.
and like all kinds of stuff like that. Where
Yeah.
it's like, I think
You
the
show
intention is
your-
there, but
yeah.
it's like you
show your disconnection from reality.
Yeah,
a little bit, like,
exactly.
okay. You guys live in a different world.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
so funny. But sorry, that
Where were we
was.
going for that? Oh, we were talking about the guitar solo thing. I was saying like, yeah. I was saying like, I don't want the idea to be the sort of end all be all. Like, I feel like sometimes I if an idea is good, I'm like, oh, I want to like hold on to it and like try to perfect it as much as I can, which is not necessarily a bad instinct to have, but it can also just really easily go way too far, you know? And so I feel like I for a long time had this mentality, like I want my discography to be this like pristine thing, because I've, you know, looked up to a lot of artists, like someone like Kanye, for example, is like had this album run that is just unbelievable, where it's like, how does anybody have that many consecutive albums that are all like incredible and iconic and etc., you know? And like, or like Radiohead or like people like that, or Kendrick or whatever. So, you know, I feel like I always wanted that, but I think the problem with that is the sacrifice is like a lot of what makes it fun, a lot of what makes it, you know, even true sometimes, like a lot of what makes it honest sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, which is just like, you know, that's like the opposite of using it as like a journal. Like if your
like
discography is your journal, it's like, this is what I made today.
Yeah.
Or this is what I was able to make that year versus this year versus this year versus this year, you know? Finding the middle ground between that, I think, is where I'm trying to get to. But for a long time, I was the opposite. It was like, nothing is leaving this room that isn't like thoroughly vetted, you know?
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like, I'm still not going to be like whatever about what I release because I care. But at the same time, I just feel like I don't want to make any one idea sacred. I want the process to be sacred, like the fact that I can create and that I have creativity, you know, like, and I want to just use that as much as I can. So, you know, and in the same way, again, that like a musician will just emote that way, I want to just throw paint at the canvas as much as I can, and then afterward decide what I want to do with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, and kind of put a different hat on and think that way. But like, I want to be less, I don't know. I want to trust my instinct more. I don't want to be afraid that my instinct is leading me wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like in life in general, but also in creativity specifically, like I want to trust that, again, the same way a guitarist going into a solo or something doesn't know exactly where that's going to go, but they trust that that thing that they have is going to lead them the right way. I want to be the same way with production or with whatever, with like songwriting. It's just like, well, just go with it, see where it takes you, and then, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I feel like something that I've been thinking about more is just like dissonance, and in like different senses, like obviously like sonically, like songs like not necessarily having to be the prettiest,
right,
you know, most perfect thing, and there's sections where you're like, whoa, like kind of taken a little bit aback by it, but also just like in the way that I carry myself, because in order I feel like what we were saying in the car, I'm trying to remember what we were saying exactly, but we were talking about how it's not necessarily, you're talking about how you want to do DJing and you want to make it your own thing, but you don't want to
to just like the essence of what it is.
Like, and doing kind of, for lack of a better term, like what everybody else is doing. You want to put your own spin on it so that it's like your own thing, but that takes going against the grain sometimes, because what everybody else is doing obviously is like tried and true and it works. But if you're trying to innovate, if that's your goal, which in certain ways it sounds like it is. Somebody had told me that the greatest creativity is derived from like getting as personal as you can, you know, because your life is so unique to you. If you're pulling directly from your life and not being so general, you know, that's a really creative space to exist in.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the same time, like, it is a balance, because you want it to be general. I mean, you don't have to, because I do look at somebody like Kanye, and he just talks about his fucking life.
The thing that that is almost at this point, I don't want to say it's almost cliche, but like that I've heard reiterated over and over in all different kinds of fields from all different kinds of people, different kinds of artists and creatives, is that the more personal they've gotten with stuff, the more people have connected to it. So sort of this irony of like, you know, feeling, and then, you know, tons of artists have said like, I was always trying to write these songs that I was like trying to manufacture for people to connect to, but then suddenly when I wrote something for myself, it was what people connected to the most.
Yeah.
And that tends to be just true for some reason, is like the more specific you are to your truth, the more people connect to it. I think it's because it's not that, I don't think it's that more people connect to it. I just think it's that those that do connect to it, even if it's less people, they connect more deeply. So you feel the connection stronger, if that makes sense. So like if you wrote a song that was super general and super, you know, just universal, more people would connect to it because more people would be inclined to listen to it. But the majority of them, the wide majority, wouldn't connect up on a deep level because they don't feel personally addressed. They just feel like, well, yeah, we all feel that. You know, everyone feels this a little bit. Which is its own thing. But then if you wrote a song that was like very, very specific to you, less people would connect to it or relate to it. But those that did would be like, holy shit, this is me to a T. This is like exactly, this feels like it's made for me, tailor-made for me. So you feel so much you feel a much stronger connection, so much more deeply connected to the song or the art or whatever. And suddenly you care more, you're more inclined to be a fan of this thing or whatever the thing is. Yeah. So I feel like the value of that is very underrated, you know, of like people, you know, deep connections, like deeper connections between the artist and their audience. I mean, you know, it's everywhere. A lot of people do it, but I feel like a lot of people forget that because you're too concerned with the term that I've heard used a lot is moving the needle. You're too concerned with like taking big steps that you don't take the small steps that deepen your connections, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's that whole vulnerability and talking from like a real place. That's what I really appreciated about that Lizzie McAlpine album. That's why I've been listening to it so much, because I'm like, oh my god, like
she's being very honest.
She's so honest, like so just talking about her life, and like, so I feel like I want to start doing that in my art, but but it's weird because a lot of the time the things that I struggle with the most involve other people. You know, like those are a lot of the biggest struggles for me, are like my interpersonal connections.
It's like I'm also putting their stuff out now too.
Yeah. And so it's like, at what degree do I want to do that, and what degree do I still feel like there's like class involved? You know, like, you know, I want to.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I want to be classy. I don't want to be.
That's the thing, though. Is like, I mean, if you think of someone like Eminem,
I was just thinking about Eminem.
Like,
Kim,
because
the song
like
Kim.
Oh, yeah, or I mean, tons of songs. I mean, he talks about his mom. He talks about Kim. He talks about a lot of stuff, so not only candidly, but like he indulges himself in like fantasies, he indulges himself in all this stuff, and you know, his music is very indulgent, and I think that's what people loved about it, was because he was just being so real and so honest.
But do you wreck your life doing that?
Like, maybe a little bit. I mean, I you know, I'm sure it affected his life for sure. Like,
it's like a karma thing.
It's a sacrifice. I mean, and that's the thing, right? That's ends up being the thing that you get to, is where you're like, oh shit, like this really is like, to be that kind of artist, there's a lot of sacrifice involved. Not just, people think of sacrifice as like, you know, long nights, like staying up and working hard. Like, that's part of it. But the other part of it is that kind of stuff. Is like, well, if you want to be, you know, like the kind of love that Eminem got from his fans, and the way his fans were so deeply connected to him, which is what made him so successful. You don't get that without the sacrifice of being so candid and etc. And the negatives that come with it, you know, which are like people knowing everything about you. Like, they know a lot of shit about you that in general it's uncomfortable for people to know about you, you know?
It's like a voyeuristic kind of like look into somebody's life. But I think that that's what's healing for people a lot of the time too, because they can, you know, you like, I think of Kendrick too, and how he sort of turns himself into the enemy sometimes in these songs, because he talks about what he's doing that he's not proud of.
Totally, yeah.
You know, and it's like that kind of vulnerability is crazy too.
I think the best comedians do that too. They
it's not just self-deprecating either for the sake of
exactly.
Being
it's not. It's more like they point out the the human flaws within them. Like it's
yeah,
like,
and everybody relates to it.
That's what
the
makes
thing.
it so. Yeah, exactly.
Everybody
That's what makes
pretends
it
like they
great. Is
don't.
that at the end of the day, they're not even talking about themselves. They're talking about everyone. They're talking about, you know, all of us. But instead of being like, you are doing this and like, you know, making it more of an attack, it's more like, well, I'm like this. I'm this shitty person, you know, but it's because we all are shitty in the same way, you know, or whatever.
I
Maybe
feel
it's
like-
not so shitty because of that or something.
I feel like we're all just kind of the same thing underneath, and we're pushed through different filters based on like our experiences in life. But there's this something that we relate to so deeply, and it's like instinctual and like maybe even in our genetics or something, to where people are pointing this out and we're discovering. It's like how we're discovering math every day, right? Like the math already exists, but we're discovering more of it, and we're discovering more of the human experience. And I feel like almost to a degree we're all having the same experience, but under different circumstances. And maybe not. Maybe all of our experiences are so unique that it's like, but there's something that we're connecting on.
Yeah.
And it trips me out.
Yeah, I don't know. But I was, in terms of just going back to what you were saying about wanting to get really personal, and you saying like listening to music that is very honest and very personal and stuff. I also think that an underrated side of that is, I think when people think personal music, they think of lyrics being really personal, which is obviously part of it. Like that's, you can get very, very specific and personal with your lyrics. But I feel like, you know, music, I mean, art in general, like of any kind, can be personal without words, right? Like, because, you know, painters can get personal, or even people who make instrumental music can be very personal. And I don't think people really think a lot about how that is. But in my mind, getting personal, you know, because I like, lyrics tend to be the like last thing I think about, you know, like they matter to me still. I still care about
when you're making music, you're saying? Or
I mean, in
what?
general, like just when I think of music, when I think about music, when I listen to music, lyrics tend to be maybe not the last thing, but they're definitely not the first thing I connect to or notice. You know, sonics are what that's what I fell in love with, is just like the sound of it, the way it sounds, the way the sound makes me feel. It's this abstract thing that since I was a kid, I've had this connection to, like how the chord changes, how the drums and the rhythms and everything make me feel, and how this one makes me feel versus that, you know, etc. So, and over time, it's just gotten more and more specific. Like this little thing makes me feel something so strong, so I become obsessed with it. And so lyrics, you know, are a bonus. I mean, and I've had a lot of music that I've really loved the lyrics of, and that I've like felt, you know, deeply emotionally connected to, but it tends not to be the first thing that I notice or connect to. And when I make music, it's the same way. Like I'd much rather make a song with shitty lyrics and great music than the opposite, because to me, that's just what I care about the most. Is what I connect to.
Yeah.
Clearly, I don't want to do either of those. I'd rather it all be, you know, good or honest or whatever. But anyway, my point is that that when I think about getting personal on my music, I tend to think about like, how do I make my production personal? And what that means to me is sort of removing a lot of the way that people tend to think of production, which is like, you know, you talk to producers in the industry and it's a lot about like commercial stuff. How do you make commercialized music? You know, it's like you take someone's idea and you make it palatable so that people can connect to it, or it's like someone wrote a song that's really cool on a piano, and you're like, well, I know as a producer that right now these kind of drum beats and these kinds of, you know, instrumentals are really popular or whatever. So it would be a good idea to take your song and turn it into this kind of song because that's what's popular. That tends to be a lot of the way people think of the job of a producer. It's like, how do I commercialize this song so that it's more palatable? Sort of. I mean, it's not about making it pretty. It's about
make it presentable.
It's about it's about squeezing it through the filter of what's popular. Sometimes that's what people. I'm saying that's not what I do, but I'm saying that's what.
Yeah, it's like, what do you consider to be presentable? I guess is the question.
Yeah, it's like what could or just in general.
Does it fit in with the rest of
what's happening right now? Exactly. Yeah. And so it's like you have a good idea when you're the guy who's like, well, pop punk is really popular, so that ballad that you wrote on a piano, what if we turn it into a pop punk song? That would be really sick because right now that's what's popular, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not, you know, trying to like shit on those people. Like I think that's difficult. It's very difficult to do, and some people are really, really good at it, and it's very impressive. But I think that that's very impersonal, right? Because it has nothing to do with you. Like it just has to do with like you have a good business mind, you have a good marketing mind, you know, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with like your opinion or your personal thing, because you know a lot of those people might not even like what's popular, but they're like it's popular.
It's like people who all wear the same clothes, you know, or you know, like it's like I feel like high school and middle school, even, and elementary school, they're all really good indicators of like what the foundations of people really are, and you can get a good scope about society because you know it's
like a mini early society.
Exactly. But you know, you grow up, but like I think back to high school and like everybody all trying to like you wear diamond and do this or you know you're putting off certain images based on it, but it's not really a form of expression in that sense. It's like almost rooted in insecurity and rooted in like I don't want to stand out. I want to fit in.
Right. And in the same way, like a producer, you know, to reconnect that with what I was saying, it's like the insecurity is I don't want to fail. I don't want to be seen as a failure. So I want to make this song as popular as possible so that it's successful, so that I'm seen as a successful producer. Yeah. That's what a lot of people tend to...
Because you're writing your own... and that's how you're defining your own success, too, within yourself.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly.
That's where it all starts.
And so the fear is of failure. The fear is... And your definition of failure is it didn't sell a lot or whatever. So you tend to... You know, the job tends to become that specifically. How do I take this and turn it into something that's a success, you know, or that makes a lot of money or whatever. But how to make it personal, I think, is when you are at that crossroad or the, you know, thousands of crossroads that you reach when you're making a song, that you choose the path that feels right to you, or that not feels right, but feels good, you know, or like, you know, is simply what you enjoy the most, you know, or simply what makes you the most excited. When you choose that, that's like personal to me. So like, so when you're producing something or when you're making something instrumentally, it's making the decisions that go against, you know, your better judgment, but that is just for whatever reason what you connect to the most, or what you like the most.
Or that is your better judgment, but you're...
Yeah, or your better judgment as in like you're like, you know, it's like those thoughts that would be like, well, this is
the insecure part of your mind.
Yeah, really. No one's gonna like this or or whatever. All those thoughts, that's like they're against so what you want. They are, of course. Yeah. And that's the difficult part, is why people listen to them so much, and why I don't blame them either, because it's like everyone struggles with it. But I feel like when you choose to do the thing that you really want to do, that deep down is like what you really want to do. Yeah. Despite all that stuff, then you're making a personal choice. So you listen to music sometimes where you see them doing that. You see the artist like constantly going left instead of going right, you know, and it has nothing to do with how weird the music sounds. You know, you could be a guy who makes like, you know, experimental, you know, industrial noise music, and you're writing this one song, and for some reason there's this instinct in you that's like, I want to make this like a poppy bubblegum pop song. That's personal. You know what I mean? Like, because it's what you want. Versus what, you know, whereas in that case,
other people are expecting me to
do some crazy noisy shit like that's distorted and etc. It's like, well, this song I don't want to do that with. So you know, but the pressure is pushing you in that direction. Like, oh, I should be doing that. I should be doing that because that's what people expect or whatever.
It's like a survival mechanism at the end of the day too.
But the personal choice is to do whatever you feel like you want to do. You know, wherever that is, and that's why I think also a lot of people like think that just because something is pop, that it's like, you know, somehow just means or like sell out or whatever, that it's like corporate or commercial just because it sounds a certain way. But really that has nothing to do with the way the music sounds. It just has to do with, are you doing what you want to do versus what other people want you to do? That's really what I think at the end of the day it is, because there are people who make all this underground music or whatever, but they don't even like it. They don't even like the music that they're making. They're just doing it because there's a scene or there's like a, you know, group of people who they know they're going to get an applause from, and that's why they do it. Like, that's as much a sellout as anything on the radio or whatever, you know what I mean? And there's music on the radio that a lot of people refuse to listen to because they think of it as this like ultra commercialized thing, which, you know, it tends to be. But there's a lot of music on the radio that came straight from somebody's soul, but that some people just write off because it's like not, you know, because it doesn't sound the way that you think. It doesn't have the aesthetic of authenticity, right? Like, and then there's like people who like are like, because the singer-songwriter thing tends to be like, you know, aesthetically thought of as authentic, right? Like, oh, this person's just sitting there with their guitar and singing or whatever. You tend to think like they're just like bearing their soul. Tons of those people are only doing that because it's popular.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like they're not bearing their soul, you know. But then there's people who are writing like super pristine pop songs who are bearing their soul in that shit, you know, even if it's not lyrically necessarily, they're making crazy decisions and they're doing incredible stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what I think getting personal is in your art, like outside of lyrics, right?
Yeah, people really, really respect and connect with the vulnerability. And it's so crazy because the strength that comes from vulnerability, it's like, it seems like it seems like it would be the opposite. Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
But like the more that you try to put on this face, I think the harder, the more people realize that, like, even they just feel it. You just feel it when something when something really connects and when something doesn't. And when you side by side compare two things, you can see like, oh wow, this was actually, you know, basically what you just said. But like coming from a place of true, this is what I'm feeling versus this is who I hope this is what I want you guys to believe that I'm feeling right now.
Sometimes in music it can be, you have something and you're like, there's this thing telling, like you made an instrumental that's really nice and you're like, I have to put vocals on it because if I don't, people aren't going to listen to it, or it's going to be deemed this other thing. It's going to be put in a category of like just instrumental music or whatever. And so you're doing that for the wrong reason, right? You're putting vocals on it at all.
Not because you want it.
Not because you think it's what's going to make the song better or make it more what you would want to hear, but because you're afraid it's not going to, you know, be received the same way without it. So maybe the personal choice in that case is no lyrics at all, you know, or whatever. Like,
I don't know I mean, I'm learning how to differentiate, and I think that's been an important part of this last like year for me, and that's why I've been loving the quality of my own music more, because I feel like so like when I came out with my first song Haze, like that was very personal, but I think it was the first thing that I made that didn't feel like I was doing an impression of something else.
Right.
You know, I mean, it definitely was inspired by a lot of stuff, but it didn't feel like when I used to sing, I used to try to sing like other people, and I didn't realize that I was doing that.
Right.
It was just because I knew that I liked the way that they sounded, so I would try to sound like them because you try to emulate, but it wasn't my own voice that I was singing out of.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean,
it's like doing an it's just doing it. I can sing like John Mayer and do all these things, you know.
I don't know. I think
gravity.
Obviously, if you're doing a direct impression, like I think again, it just depends where it comes from inside of you. If it's like something that you know you're doing a direct impression,
I hear a lot of people doing impression, like I hear like a lot of Amy Winehouse type singers, like a lot of like.
But I think also if you think of your if you think of your voice as like an instrument, then it's a little different because it's like, you know, you that's how I tend to think of it. Like I tend to think of my voice as an instrument, and like so I just want it to sound. My concern is whether or not it fits with the song, like whether or not it fits, like and sounds the way I want it to sound, or you know, a way that I enjoy. But at that point, like obviously, again, if I'm thinking specifically, I want to do a song that sounds like this person, and I'm doing just an impression, then that's a different thing. But outside of that, like I don't know, I feel like, you know, using a guitar isn't an impression of John Mayer because you're using a guitar.
It can be.
No, you can, exactly. But this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The same way, like vocally, it can be an impression.
Back in the day,
but just
I used
because
to emulate John Mayer a lot.
Sure,
really like John Mayer.
But do you see my point? Like
not everything that he says.
Like, like you're saying about the Amy Winehouse sounding singers, right? Like I totally understand, but I think there are some people out there who genuinely are just like, I love Amy Winehouse. I want to sing like Amy Winehouse, and they do, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, you are doing an impression. But then there's other people who are like, well, I'm gonna make a song, and this feels right. Like this sounds good, and it happens to kind of sound like Amy Winehouse, but whatever. Yeah. You know, like at that point, I don't know. I feel like do what you think is best for what you want to hear. Do what's best for the song. Like at that point, I feel like if you're thinking too much about like, oh, but this sounds too much like that person or whatever, then I don't know. Then you're also
that's
you know what I mean? Thinking yourself out of it. I get what you're saying though. I just think also sometimes I've talked to people when it comes to vocals, where they're like, if I'm not singing the way I talk, or if I'm not singing with this specific voice, then I'm not using my voice. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like your voice can be a million different things.
Yeah.
Like, your voice can do your voice is an instrument. So it's like the same way with the guitar. Sometimes you're going to play chords. Sometimes you're going to play, you know, more picking stuff or whatever. Sometimes you're going to fucking just smack the thing with a baseball bat.
I think what
know.
it was that it was really hard for me to get to the place to where I felt comfortable putting my own voice, like the way that the way that I speak, and because I just wanted to talk as me as I could on a lot of the songs. I mean, some songs I don't like Hey Money Money, like that's like a weird like
sure. You're doing different voices.
Yeah. And I like to do that too, but I think that I spent a majority of my life like doing impressions of other people or sort of like hiding my true self because I feared how it would be received, so much to the point to where like when I started singing, I didn't know how to sing from me. You know, I just was saying and doing things that I felt like I had heard other people do before, because, and the same thing happens in conversations. I hear it all the time. That's why people talk about TikTok all the time. That's why people, you know, just kind of, you know, they have these like canned answers and stuff, and it's because like they know what works, but it's not coming from like a direct, this is me right now, this is just like something that I picked up along the way, and everything that you are is what you picked up along the way, really. Like
I think I get what you're saying though. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. I just think that, I don't know, I mean, as specifically when it comes to like your voice, I feel like whatever your voice can do is
see, you're somebody who's been tapped into your self for a long time. I think that you're unique in that way.
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I think it's pretty. I mean, maybe more so than most people. You're very expressive. You know, you've told me you're very expressive from a very young age, and you always try deeply to explore that, and you were willing to go counter and to speak from your own voice and your own opinions more than most people. Or just for whatever reason, you're just innately set up that way, and I think that's what makes you a really great producer and artist in general. And I don't think most people are that way, though, and that's the thing. And I feel like
I mean, I
was a late bloomer in that sense.
I think I've also like had a lot of trouble, though. I mean, you know, if we're talking about, it depends what we're talking about, I guess. But like in general, like I think I've had a lot of trouble with. I mean, you know, I'm always feeling like I don't know who I am, and I'm kind of figuring it out. But like, so I mean, even specifically when it comes to the voice, like, and singing, like, that's something that I've never really been super confident in, even to this day. And I like every day it's like I'm discovering more about it, and sometimes it's for the better, sometimes for the worse. But I don't know. I think it's because I'm thinking of it from a production standpoint, and I'm like, as a producer, I don't want anything to be off limits, like any kind of thing, you know, like, so sometimes it's like, sometimes I'm creating something completely from scratch that feels like it's that none of it is directly coming from something else. But if I make a drum beat that sounds like the drum beat of a different song, then whatever, I'm not going to worry about that. You know, which is where I'm saying the difference between an impression and the opposite is like, if I'm like taking somebody else's complete formula and just applying it because I know it works, then that's an impression. That's not fun, or, you know, whatever. But if some kind of part of the inspiration of another song seeps into what I'm doing, and it's a piece of it, then I'm not super concerned with that. So I feel the same way vocally, where I'm like, you know, when I'm singing a song, I'm not thinking, or generally, I mean, definitely at the beginning I was, but I'm trying not to be thinking about like any particular person or something that I want to sound like. I'm just kind of trying to sound good as much as I can. But if at that point it doesn't sound like me, if somebody else listens to it and they're like, is that you? Like, they can't even tell it's me. I don't really mind. I'm not really super concerned.
Somebody did that to me recently, and I actually kind of took it as a compliment, because I'm like, that was me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm like, exactly. that's just another facet of me that maybe you haven't been exposed to very much.
Exactly.
Yet.
And it's the same way, like, I like that with production too. If somebody listens to something I produce and they're like, oh shit, you produced that? Because it's funny, like I tend to think that I produce a wide variety of stuff, and I feel like I do, but people tend to be able to pick out when I produce something, which is nice. It feels good. But after a certain point, I'm like, damn, really? Like everything is just me. Like, you know, so it does feel nice when someone's like, oh shit, I didn't know you would produce something like this. I didn't know you would make something
It's
so
progress
here or
and
whatever.
it's like-
It feels good. And so in the same way, yeah, like with my voice, I just think of it as another, just area of sound, that I can explore and fuck with and whatever. Like, like the same way I can explore and fuck with everything else. Like, it doesn't really. So at that point, I tend not to think too much about like whether or not, like, what if I sound like this or I sound like that or whatever. It's just, do I like it? Does it sound good? Does it not? That's it. Like, at the end of the day, if I sound like I'm doing more of this person or that person, again, unless it's like I'm actually just lifting from them.
I what I felt like is I couldn't do it. I
Right.
couldn't sing out of my own voice. I literally did not know how.
Right, I get
And
you,
so
yeah,
once
yeah.
I learned how to do it, then I'm like, okay, now I feel like stepping out, because it didn't feel like stepping out before. It felt like an identity crisis, like all the way. And my
I
life
get you,
has
yeah,
been
yeah.
one giant identity crisis the
Sure,
whole
sure,
time.
yeah.
But I'm like finally, I think, starting to sit into what I am right now and feel
more
like,
comfortable and
just I'm at a fuck it point. I'm at such a fuck it point where it's like there's no point in me doing anything if it's not coming from the most genuine place that I can
That's
pull
great.
from.
That's a great place to be, man. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm also, I mean, it's just a constant, process of getting closer to that, closer to who you genuinely are.
Yeah.
And, I think, yeah, you have days where you feel further away from it, days where you feel closer to it. It's never like one thing. It's never like stagnant.
Yeah.
It's like, or the road isn't just linear. It kind
Yeah.
of fucking goes up and down,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a great place to be. I think that's the way to think about it, is just like try to get, the most genuine you can. I mean, and especially when it comes to your art, because it's like that's what it is. That's everything with it. It's like is the closer you are to indulging yourself in who you really are, which isn't an indulgence. It isn't an indulgence really, or maybe it is a little bit, but. If I feel like we get taught that doing stuff for yourself just because you like it is like it's like, oh, you're
There's
like
so much pushback.
Yeah, exactly.
Why? It's because people are so sad that they've denied
Can't do it
themselves their whole lives.
Maybe
that, like,
partly, yeah.
Or it's like
I don't know.
it's like what's that one? The Stanford prison experiment,
Right,
where
right.
like they started to step into these roles and they started to abuse people because they felt this social pressure that came from, I don't know, like
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. What turns people into like these bullies of like not wanting you to be expressive? Because for some reason people take self-expression as like a threat to their
Right.
It's a threat to their ego for
Right.
some reason.
Yeah, or like a threat to the way they see the world. Like they have this image of what the
Challenges.
world should be, and generally what people are like. And then when somebody breaks out of that,
Yeah.
or reveals that they're not that, then it's like challenges their worldview.
And really, I don't think that they're that either, And I
Right.
think that
a lot of time they're not. Yeah,
and so it's like,
they've also just been, pushed into.
so I want to like awaken people somehow. I don't know how to do that. I gotta awaken myself, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. And I'm in this awakening process.
Sure.
But I feel like just pushing out genuine energy. Because I need to start. Because that's how I was thinking about it for a long time. Like, how do I help people? What do I say? What do I do? But then I realized, like, I think working with the kids has helped me with this the most.
Sure.
Is that just pushing out the positivity and leading by example
Right.
is
right.
the most effective way.
Yeah.
Telling people that they should do something versus you doing it yourself
Also,
in
like,
front of them.
also, I think that feeling like you have to be a part of somebody's journey is also a little bit self-centered. Like, if that makes sense. Like,
But
you
I
want
want to because I love people.
Yeah, but see, you want to.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. It's like you want to.
They want me.
But this is
Everybody wants me.
Yeah, right.
They can't help it.
But yeah, like you're thinking about yourself when you're like, well, how do I help you? It's
Yeah,
like, well,
definitely.
maybe the best way to help them is just,
Do
like you
you.
said, just do you and like lead by example.
Yeah.
Because in
I
a lot of
think that's
cases,
right.
like, huh?
I think that's right.
Yeah, like in a lot of cases, like, well, first off, in a lot of cases, there's nothing you can do really to help. Like, you
might be doing more harm than good when
you're or
just telling somebody to be something that they're
or
not
trying
right
to
now.
push them or whatever, or trying
in a
to
certain
like
direction,
because you're getting involved in something that maybe you shouldn't be getting involved in. And so, like you're saying, like just doing you, trying to be as kind as possible and as genuine as possible, and just leading by example. Because also, like you're saying about awakening, like, and being in the awakening process, I don't really know that there's there's no end to that journey. You don't just like
one day I'm awakened.
Yeah, it's like you're waiting. Like,
your eyes glow.
I think in 3 more months I'll be like awakened.
Yeah,
it's like no, like you just kind of do that. So I feel like maybe it's not this black and white, but like any time that you're taking away from your journey to like get super involved in someone else's journey is time that you're like not spending awakening yourself. If that makes sense. So like,
but in a way, it's part of your journey too.
It can be, but if it is, then it is. But I'm saying if it isn't, and you're just trying to force yourself into somebody else's,
but if you're
journey,
doing it, then it is. You know what I mean? Like,
but
what?
No, that's not necessarily true. I don't.
But what it is and what it like represents is what is at question. Because if you're getting involved in other people's thing, that is part of your journey. But maybe the thing to learn from that is that you shouldn't do that. And that's how you get out of that. But you have to run into enough walls.
You only do that. Like I feel like at some point you got to learn from it, right?
I guess. At that point. Yeah. Some people never do, or or maybe what they're learning.
Yeah.
It's all perspective. Like everybody's got. I think everybody's perspective is equally like valuable. You can derive because there's infinite potential and infinite value in every perspective. If you just look at it from the right lens,
there's something to learn from everybody's.
And there's something to learn equally from successes and fuck-ups.
But this is what I'm saying. That has more to do with you than it does with them. Like, not everybody's perspective is beneficial to themselves, but everybody's perspective could potentially be beneficial to you because you could learn from it.
Their perspective is beneficial to themselves.
Not necessarily, not always.
Why? Because it's like self-destructive.
Sure, absolutely. There's tons of people whose perspectives are harming them constantly.
Yeah,
and that's not beneficial to themselves.
Yeah,
but what you're saying is true, which is that you could learn from anybody's perspective. There's something to learn if you just look at it the right way.
Well, I feel like people's perspectives come.
If your perspective on their perspective is the right perspective, then you'll learn. But do you see what I'm saying though? And I feel like some people, their own perspective isn't helping them, and in that case, like they would benefit from a change of perspective, and you might be able to see that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually do it. That you can make them change their perspective per se. Maybe you can. Maybe you are the right person, but maybe you're not.
I feel like their perspective is rooted. I think everybody's perspective is rooted deeply in like a survival mechanism. So like their perspective is of the utmost importance to them because that's the thing that has kept them alive.
I agree.
Up until this point,
sure. But it's not the only perspective that could keep them alive.
No, and there's probably ones that they could develop, but they only get one. They only get one perspective. You get one perspective throughout your life. It's just the accumulation of your experiences in life.
Okay,
that's your one perspective.
I guess I get what you're saying.
If you look at it from like
But that's not. I don't think that's like. I feel like that's the wrong wording of it. You don't get one perspective forever. You only you have perspective for your whole life, is what you're saying. But it's not one, like if we're talking about like perspective as, because perspective means like a vantage point, right? Like it's the way you're looking at something.
Yeah.
You don't have one way of looking at things forever. That's right. That's not what you're saying. You're not saying that you have this one perspective, this one vantage point for your whole life. That's not what you're saying.
I'm saying
you have a vantage point always, but the vantage point itself can change, right? Where you're looking at it from can change throughout.
Yes.
So, so I think you can have different perspectives. Clearly, right? Mm-hmm. Throughout your life, your perspective can change. The fact that you have a perspective won't change. You will always have a perspective. It just might be a different one depending on where you are or whatever the thing is, right?
What's the meaning of life, JD?
But yeah, I forgot what I was trying to say with that. I felt like I was going somewhere, but whatever.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Well, this has been your perspective for today. Thank you for watching. I'll be back soon. I think. I hope that I can keep on doing these.
Yeah,
I want to because I feel like it's increasing my perspective. The reason that I love doing this is that it does increase my perspective, and if anybody else benefits from it, cool. And if not, then it's okay. I'm still, I'm doing this art for me. God damn it!
All right. It did, yeah. It cut out.
Oh, wait. Also, you should all go stream Andrea's new project, Later Now, produced by Swoon. And you should go and follow Swoon on all platforms. And you should be on the lookout for his music coming out this next year, because I know it's going to be crazy, because he is one of the most insane producers that I personally know. So, all right. Deuces.